Hey, everybody.
Hey, Tiffany.
Normally this is where I'd say it's 4:20. Everybody take a hit, but it's 7 o'clock. Everybody take a hit.
It's still 4:20 sesh.
Hey, I didn't know if you heard me. I was on mute.
Hey, I'm glad you could join us.
Yeah, I forgot last time.
It's okay. I think we had to cancel last time, didn't we, Drew? We were both
We
down
did,
last
yeah. We were both down for the count, and now we're back.
It's
No,
funny. I was not feeling well that day myself. So
Yeah, and I know that Zach's been complaining, like I have, that these migraines just keep coming one right after another with these storms that we keep having. So I bet
that's
it's
terrible.
yeah, I bet it's hurting a lot of our patients. Shelby, where are you at again? Are you in Arizona, hon?
I am. I'm out in Phoenix.
Yep. So what's the weather like for you? Is it warm?
Oh, I won't rub that in your face. We were
That's fine. That's fine.
we had sunshine and clear skies today, but it has been a little chilly for us, but we should be at 80 next week. So
Nice.
That
Oh,
sounds
man.
wonderful.
It does, doesn't it? Let's go visit Shelby.
I'll send some more warmer your guys' way.
Yeah, you
Yes.
should definitely.
Please do. Well, thanks
Yes.
everybody for joining us.
Yes. I was just gonna say we got viewers on Facebook, and like the intro said, in case you saw that or you missed it, if you have any questions, comments, want to be part of the conversation, drop them in the comment section. I got them here on my iPad right here, and we'll add it to the conversation. If you want to join us on Zoom, come join our TRUCE community group. We post the Zoom link in there. We have to keep that private because we've got trolls that like to just have fun. So we got to keep that a little within the community. But it's easy to join the community. Just say you're going to follow the rules, and you'll be part of our TRUCE community. So just search for that. Christine, do you want to take over?
Yes, I'll take over. Thank you, Drew. And thank you everybody who's joining us here in studio, as I like to call it. I like that patient and visitor interaction. And then those of you who are out on our media, thanks for joining us this evening. This is our new time. We have been meeting on Thursdays at 4:20, but we've had a lot of people requesting us to do it a little later because they want to get home from work and they want to jump in and participate. And as you can hear, the doorbell just keeps ringing. We just keep having more people join us. So like Drew gave some instructions, if you want to be part of the conversation, jump in on that Zoom link or feed Drew a question or two. Tonight, I'm really excited to have officially as a guest and not just a passerby in and out of the room, Doug Rice. And Doug Rice, some of you guys may know, some of you may know him as the former president of the Epilepsy Association here of Utah. A very prominent face in our advocacy effort over the years. Him and his daughter Ashley were very known in the media and on Capitol Hill. I don't know who didn't know them. He's a very passionate father, cancer survivor himself, paramedic, firefighter, the things, all the stuff. And we asked him to be on here with us tonight, one, to catch up, to see how him and Ashley are doing. He has transitioned into full-time daddyhood and isn't playing advocate with us anymore. We want to hear how things are going with him. But also the reason why I asked him to join us is for some of you who may not know, as well as it being Women's International Day and Women's History Month this month, it also is Developmental Delays Month, Awareness Month. And we have a lot of conditions on our conditions list that fall into that category. And Doug himself has a daughter who falls into that list. And so I wanted to have a very open conversation with Doug about his experience, raising awareness about this month and talking about some of those conditions that fall into that list and why it's important for us as advocates to continue to raise awareness about medical cannabis and how it can help some of our disease states. So Doug, thank you for joining me and welcome.
Glad I could be here. I've been able to pop in a couple of times, but this is kind of different being an official guest. So I'm glad to be here. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. I wanted to start off with just how are you guys doing? It's been a few years since we passed Prop 2 back in 2018. In March, on March 2nd of this month, we celebrated 3 years that the dispensaries have been open, and you've been away from the limelight. We gave you a break for the past few years. How have you and Ashley been? What has it been like for you now that the access is a little bit different?
It's been interesting. It's not like a lot changed for us overall. I may not be up on Capitol Hill as often as I used to be. However, my own personal representative, and I'm not gonna, well, should I mention Ken Ivory's name or not?
I don't know, maybe.
Yes,
The
mention
dude
him.
is just, yeah, I don't have anything against religion. I think Ken's biggest problem, from what I can see, is that he believes that his district stops at the end of his ward. And I think that's been part of his problem. And so I've been trying to hold him accountable for that. Ken is a devout constitutionalist who believes that there's far too much federal shenanigans going on in our system. And to a certain degree, I can totally get that. But Ken's big thing is trying to return federal land to state control. And while I think that that might be a noble cause on levels, there's not a single piece of federal land in his district. So why in the hell he's wandering off and not paying attention to his own constituents is a question that I ask him on a regular basis. Ashley's doing okay. Her medical condition hasn't changed much. Back when I was on Capitol Hill on a regular basis, we were under the impression that Ashley had Angelman syndrome, which is a problem with chromosome number 15. There's a deletion there. 15q5, I think it was. It's been a long, anyway, turns out that that was wrong. We found out by having a genetic test done so that we could fine tune her meds and see where cannabis might be able to fit in there. And the test came back and they said, no, 15's fine. 5 is the bad one. She has what's called Pura syndrome, P-U-R-A. And Pura, the PUR alpha protein it's a protein that's in all of our tissue, our nails, our skin, all of our organs have PUR protein in them. And it's being designed wrong in her body. So basically what's happening is when a nerve fires, the signal comes from this end and heads for this end down to the neuron. It's leaking out. It's as if it's like it's a bad electrical wire and the signal is going out into the surrounding tissue rather than getting to its target. So that's one of the problems that she has, but it's also causing problems as she's getting older with joints, where the tissue in her joints is not being developed properly. So we're seeing some problems there, and she's not as mobile as she used to be, but we're hanging in there. We're doing okay. We're using a hemp product. We haven't had to go, well, and right now we're actually staying away from THC because we are trying to get her into a study for another medication. And she can't have anything illicit. And as far as her neurologist is concerned, THC is a bad thing. Although personally and anecdotally, we've seen where small amounts of THC have actually done a good job of helping her control seizures. And we'll get into that a little bit further. I just wanted to kind of give a little bit. So we're handling it. It's been kind of unique being retired. I'm still licensed for, I've got an emergency medical services license. I'm no longer a paramedic. I actually dropped that for paperwork reasons. I am an advanced EMT now, so that I went from having 0 hours of education to 148. So it just made it that much simpler. And then I don't practice in the field. I'm teaching for a college here in the Valley. So that's busy. That happens at night. I teach at night so that my wife, who works during the day, can watch Ashley. And she's already in bed. Those of you that know her know that she usually crashes pretty early. So she's already down. So
yeah. So, and like I was telling everybody else, you have now resigned, or what happened to Epilepsy Association? They finally close their doors, right?
There were two different epilepsy nonprofits operating in Utah, and Epilepsy Association of Utah was a local. Epilepsy Foundation is actually under the umbrella of the federal program coming out of DC. We were pretty much a casualty of COVID. Our funding dried up, and rather than keep trying to fight the fight, and some of it was duplication, we just figured it was easier for us to just throw in the towel. And we've still got people. Melissa Bastian still runs an epilepsy association out in the Uinta Basin and is doing a tremendous job for the patients out there. So we still have a Facebook presence, but as far as our programs, those are no longer available.
Okay. Well, I want to make sure that I give a nod to the association, the Epilepsy Association of Utah, because it was that association that really put CBD on the map for epilepsy patients. We were the first state to have that CBD legislation, and that was the patients group that did it. And so thank you, Doug, and all those families that were attached to the Epilepsy Association. Annette Mon and Jennifer May, who were really the faces of that first round, raising awareness and trying to get our state to have a little more compassion when it comes to cannabis and its therapeutic use. So hat tip, thank you so much, truly, truly. And so it's nice having you on here to kind of see it come full circle. You know, here we had CBD only legislation. You couldn't even go into a store to purchase it. You had to go out of state. And we moved that ball in 4 years to passing Prop 2. And now we have 3 years in dispensaries. So it's progress, and it's a lot to do with patients and their caregivers who have become advocates. So thank you, Doug. I really appreciate everything that you guys have done. I was wondering if you could go into a little bit about how CBD has impacted your life, and what your thoughts on. I don't know if you saw the latest on the FDA and their stance on CBD. I don't know if you've been watching any of GW Pharmaceutical and how they've progressed over the years. There just seems to be a lockhold on CBD, and then you've got the flip side, which is the synthetic version. But I really want to talk about whole plant. We have one of our hemp growers in studio here. Tim, hat tip to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. So I want to really highlight the beautiful aspects of CBD, the positive aspects of CBD that we do see, and share your personal experience and thoughts on that.
Well, going back to when we were still pushing to get this legalized, we weren't really sure whether or not it was gonna fly, and pretty much because anytime anybody mentioned CBD, oh, that's that marijuana oil, right? People were absolutely terrified by it, unless they had a loved one that needed this as a medicine. Most of the groundwork where we started was with Paige Figge. Paige is a Colorado mom to Charlotte Figge. Charlotte, who passed away, boy, has it been almost a decade now? Charlotte was a young girl, a twin daughter of Paige's with Dravet syndrome epilepsy. And she had done some digging and found that hemp was actually a great product for being able to control seizures. And I feel so much empathy for Paige and so much appreciation for the work that she did. She watched her daughter die several times. She had done CPR on her daughter in the emergency room, trying to get her daughter to come out of the seizure that she was in. And the first week that they provided CBD oil to Charlotte, 0 seizures. She went from 15, 20 seizures a day to 0. It was eventually a seizure that took Charlotte's life. But when I think back to those times and how much head budding on a wall, I would have to do, well, we all did it though, in an effort to get people to understand that this was really a benign product. It wasn't like people were going to overdose and die on CBD. And I think there was far too much caution and far too much, there was disbelief, I guess is the word that I'm looking for, where lawmakers didn't want to run with this at all. And it was because there wasn't a lot of research on this. And research has always been our friend. But the problem with research is it costs money. And kind of fast forwarding to today, Ashley still uses CBD oil. Only it's an FDA approved CBD oil. It's made by GW Pharma, a British corporation that was just bought out by an Irish pharmaceutical company. And GW Pharma has been through all the FDA steps to gain FDA approval for use as a medication. So we can talk a little bit about price a little bit later. And I think
I was just going to ask that.
Well, okay, let's talk about it then. The first bottle of Charlotte's Web, when we, back in the day before we got approval in the state, we were bootleggers. We were outlaws. We would go to California. We'd go to Colorado and buy bottles of Charlotte's Web. The first bottle of Charlotte's Web that we purchased was about $750.
And how big of a bottle was it?
Yeah.
That was 100 ml. So what is it? 3.38 or 3.8? It's under 4 ounces of oil, was $750. The price as they grew their network and got more farmers growing hemp to turn into Charlotte's Web, the price came down to $500 and then dropped a little bit lower. Then GW Pharma gets their approval, and therein lies the difference, the cost of FDA approval and then the cost of providing something at a profit for the benefit of your stockholders. We're down to 250 ml, or excuse me, $250 for a 100 ml bottle with 50 milligrams of CBD in each milliliter. The stuff that we're getting that's a pharmaceutical level, as far as GW is concerned, the Epidiolex has 100 milligrams, so twice as concentrated. So we would have to give twice as much Charlotte's Web to get to the same level of control of seizures. That said, again, I said 250, so we'd be looking at $500 for the Charlotte's Web. That same amount, that 100 milliliters that she's getting twice a day, those bottles are $3,000 a pop. And if it weren't for the only reason that we're not using Charlotte's Web, which is a full spectrum oil, by the way, and the Epidiolex is that's an isolate. So that is simply, it's CBD only. There's nothing else in there. And we saw—
Does insurance cover this at all?
That's the reason why we are where we are, Drew. We're in this position because that $3,000 is covered by our insurance. The $500 was not. So $500 over 12 months, right? We're looking at $7,200. But at $3,000 a pop, insurance is picking that up. So we're looking at $36,000. Now we are only at half of the potential dose. So we could end up using $72,000 worth of CBD oil every year. And obviously there's no way I can afford that. I was a public servant. I splurge every once in a while, and I have an off-label beer. I can't afford $72,000. I can't afford the $3,600 really. I mean, I've got bills. So that's where the problem lies, is that, so Christine and I were talking about this a little bit last week, and I'll kind of throw some numbers out here that ought to really blow your mind about this. So with epilepsy, epilepsy actually is more prevalent. Epilepsy takes more lives every year than breast cancer. About 43,000 people die every year in the US from breast cancer. 45,000 plus die from epilepsy. There's 3.4 million people in Utah, or not in Utah, 3.4 million people nationwide that have epilepsy. And that's the thing about the use of Epidiolex. Epidiolex can only be used, according to the FDA, if the person has Lennox-Gastaut, which is a type of epilepsy, or Dravet syndrome, like Charlotte had. 5% of those 3.4 million have Lennox-Gastaut. 0.17% have Dravet syndrome. So Christine and I were kind of trying to figure it out, and I'm not great when it comes to math, but I got out my abacus and came out with that means that the people that would be eligible to use Epidiolex nationwide would be roughly 176,000 patients out of 3.4 million. That's a drop in the bucket. So obviously, this Irish pharmaceutical company is going to try and bust open the door and see if there are other ways to utilize Epidiolex off-label or for different types of epilepsy, just to be able to make more profit. Because it's
and again, that's the thing. It's profit, and they're able to do these outrageous prices. It's exactly what they did to insulin.
Yep.
Insulin used to be $1 a vial. The patent was sold. It was, made with public money. The patent was sold, all of that. And then now, we have this parasitic pharmaceutical infrastructure. I guess that's the nicest way to call it without using any bad words. But yeah, they're able to draw up the price and sell these vials at hundreds or sometimes thousands of dollars each, when the same exact product can be made. I've watched our friend Justin make extract, and he sells it extracts by the same pharmaceutical quality. You can get that an ounce in a syringe for $70. It's the same exact thing.
And yet the federal government is going to say that what Justin has is a Schedule I drug.
Yeah.
It's a Schedule I substance, and the stuff that, even though it might even be chemically identical, the stuff that Greenwich is pushing, the Epidiolex, that stuff that's okay. I believe we were looking at the bottle the other day. I believe it's a Schedule IV.
Yeah. I was going to say that, the Farm Bill took it out of the Schedule I for hemp.
Yeah.
But see, they're still playing that game with, what is CBD? They don't want to touch it because they've put themselves in a bit of a quandary, taking everybody back to 2013 and 2014, when the government decided that 0.0 or 0.3% was hemp. And so we've been dealing with that weird war. And now they've decided that Epidiolex is a drug, but they just descheduled it from Schedule I. So now it's in this weird limbo state where it is a drug. You buy it from a pharmacy, but you also can buy it at the gas station. That's a little weird of what we're talking about. And
add to it the way the state of Utah treats it, it needs to be handled as if it's like yellow cake uranium or processed plutonium. Like, it is the most dangerous thing. You need to have a security detail point to try. It's rope water, but they treat it like it's asinine. How it's funny, but it's not, because they're serious, and that's.
Well, and the sad thing is this state was supportive of hemp. They were supportive of hemp, but in the weirdest dichotomy that I still can't figure out, they absolutely clipped the hemp farmers at the knees. They could not bargain in this state. They could not actually provide for patients in the state in a real manner. So I don't understand it. It's still very confusing to me, as I'm sure it is to everyone else. And at some point, Tim, I would love to get your take on it, on your experience being a hemp farmer here in Utah. I want to just mention Tiffany as somebody who really does support low THC. She's sensitive to that. So she wants good quality CBD products too. No, not to put you out there like that, Tiffany, but we've discussed that too. It's important to patients who are still looking for that. Me and Drew are definitely high THC individuals, and we need that. But we have always been fighting for access for everybody.
But we also need the CBD too. I mean, we have study after study that shows a 1-to-1 ratio is important for a lot of things like PTSD, cancer. In fact, there was, I'm trying to think of the exact study, Christine, if you can remember it, because I think you shared it. But there was a study that came out last year where they found that if you try to treat cancer, I think it was a breast cancer, a specific type of breast cancer, with THC alone, it actually is a problem and it exacerbates it. But if you do the 1-to-1 ratio, it attacks the cancer. So, we need to have quality CBD that we can trust that is at the same quality level as the full spectrum cannabis as well. We need full spectrum hemp.
And to bring it back to awareness, developmental delay awareness month, that's what's going on. A lot of these, as I went investigating to understand, well, what are those conditions? Just to name a few so people know what I'm talking about. We're talking about the autism spectrum. We're talking about Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, fetal alcohol, attention deficit, speech or language. A lot of these things are remedied with CBD, and it's the ideal therapy for a lot of people. And so we're still in this weird situation where CBD became legal and hemp became legal in 2018, and the hemp farmers were eager to get in there, and then we had this oversupply and things kind of took a weird turn. And we need to get it back on track because we do still need access. Shelby is a nurse, and I know that she deals with patients all the time, and probably as a nurse like I do with a lot of the patients that come to me, you start them out low and slow. Let's see how you do on CBD and slowly add in THC. That's the most therapeutic and kindest approach when you start dealing with patients. So this conversation for this month is especially important when we watch CBD not getting very far legislatively into the states that really need the help and the support. I'm frustrated for our hemp farmers. They tried to save themselves and went that other direction, and we still need them. We still need that support here, and we don't know how to raise awareness that those two things, you don't have to not have one and over the other. I don't know if that made sense, but you know what I mean. You don't have to choose low quality over good quality. We can have a good situation here where we don't have to ban hemp altogether. We can have some quality access going on. Sorry for
and there needs to be some balance to it. Like the way Utah is trying to approach it is a zero sum. We have to win, they have to lose. This, like, life is not binary, and I wish we could get out of that mindset where we need to have a balance in all of that. We need to have, like we said, quality hemp product. And also, if Utah was able to encourage their hemp industry, not just for the medicinal qualities, but all the industrial things. Utah is a perfect climate for growing hemp, and it's way more water wise than all this alfalfa nonsense that we're growing. Like, imagine if Utah converted from alfalfa to hemp. Like, they just need to think. And I know that's a hard ask against the Utah way to think and use reason. But
let's bring in some of our guests. Doug, are you ready for that? We're going to just start throwing some people into the conversation with us. Is that cool?
Like Tiff, yeah, had something to say, didn't you?
Yeah,
I did, and hopefully I can get back my train of thought. I forgot. As far as the hemp goes, oh, for crying out loud, I've forgotten. Must not have been that important.
What happened?
You know what? What was that?
Say, look what happens when you have patients medicated and they can't remember what they were talking about.
Different strains. I actually have one that I'll use before I go see my therapist, and I always forget what I want to say. So he's gotten upset with me over that. So anyhow, yeah, I totally forgot my train of thought. It wasn't important.
That's okay. Let's. Well, maybe I'd like to pull Tim in if you would like to add some rich thoughts to this conversation about CBD and our.
I don't know if it's not rich, but I can tell you this. I personally and I've used a lot of different hemp products before. Tim's are some of the best I've ever used, because there's a huge balance. And this is actually one of the things I wanted to say. You got to find a balance, because we've got lots of hemp farmers and we've got lots of processors, but are they making good medicine? Because there are some out there that straight up just don't work. You know, they don't work at all. It's snake oil. And then there are some that work really well. And then the sad truth is, and Christine knows what I'm talking about, and I'm not going to name any company names, but they turn out to be dirty and awful and rotten. And they do really terrible things to patients unknowingly. And like I said, Christine knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, they willfully hurt people. And so it's hard to know who's a good one to trust. And then the original thing I was actually going to say is, you know, you guys talked about how, you know, it's so out of balance as far as the way the hemp growers are actually being treated in the state of Utah and CBD as a whole. Is it church related? Is it money related? Because I can tell you this, if it's religion or church related, these guys have got to know their own history. Hemp was one of the main crops that was being required to grow in the state of Utah. Hemp and flax. Why don't we get back to the roots of this great religious state, you know, the so-called great religious state, and, you know, use that? I mean, obviously that goes into all those hemp products, you know, rope and, you know, fabric and just whatever. So I just don't understand why they don't see that aspect of it.
I think we're dealing with selective amnesia.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to give people just a little background, and then Tim can finish. Tim is a cannabis grower and has been in the space for 25 plus years, right, Tim?
Yeah,
and came to our state and started growing here. And so he has some background. And Tim, please add to the conversation. What has your experience been with the state? What has your experience been with other hemp players? To Tiffany's point, it seems like we do have some ethical players, and then we have some offshoots, and we'll just be polite on that.
So I you know, going a little bit back further, when I was in Oregon in 2010, we were starting to acquire these CBD strains that when a lot of people weren't talking about the CBD strains going into the Harley Sues and the Canatonics, and more specifically, what Doug was talking about with the Charlotte's Web used to be named Sour Tsunami, but then the Stanley brothers kind of took that and then switched it into their name and then morphed that into the strain. But CBD having that well benefit, I'd have to say that the one-to-ones are the best influence right now with cannabis and CBD, or hemp, if you will. So that's my take on that. But it always comes down to strain specific because of the individuality of the specific person taking that product. And then more specifically too, as well as terpene profile has a lot to do with the rehabilitation when it comes to epilepsy. And a lot of research and development that we did about 10, 12 years ago, what the backbone of that was one of the number one terpenes we really paid attention to was linalool. Linalool being anticonvulsant and antiseptic, and finding those fundamentals of those strains. But I just wanted to touch on that for just a little bit. But I haven't, I ran into a little bit of scrutiny when I moved back here. I'm a native of Salt Lake City. I was born and raised in Baniful, Utah. And so coming back here after a few years of being gone for a while, I ran into some scrutiny and ran into a lot of people who claim to be CBD processors and CBD representatives of sales on retail, and finding out that there was a lot of people who were just after that money grab, just like a lot of other people were, creating entirely way too much biomass and milk product. I came here about 3.5 years ago and went to a symposium, and I met about 40 or 50 different hemp farmers, and they were all wondering, how are we going to get rid of that elephant in the room, which is that product of hemp, trying to get rid of that magnitude of a large variety of hemp being grown on a high scale of 30 to 100 acres at a time. And everybody kind of bottlenecked themselves. And then they ran into these new laws that Utah forth. And now there's hardly any hemp farmers here in Utah, which is very difficult for people to understand. A lot of the CBD hemp that we have now in Utah is imported from outside sources. A lot of it's from China. A lot of it's synthetic. There's a lot of distillate, a lot of CO2, and a lot of isolate out there. And the synthetics are really taking over the headway. But as far as for me, I haven't really had any problems too much, just because I've been through a lot of the things that are going on right now, a decade ago. And so what I found is just talking to Attorney General and talking to Craig Butters and Kelly Pearson and getting involved and sitting in the rooms and talking and delegating about how we can facilitate ourselves with a professional level of hemp, and then ultimately grow that and process it. So I've been processing for a little over 13, 14 years. I'm currently processor here in Utah. We grow the plant, we breed the plant, we manufacture, we sell, do it all in-house. But I really haven't had a problem. Working with the dynamics of the legalities is something I'm very used to. So instead of trying to have a combative nature against a lot of the legislatures and a lot of people who are in charge making the rules, I facilitate myself with probably a little bit higher intellectual mentality when it comes to it, and focus more on the medicine rather than the fighting, if you will.
Tim, you meant, sorry, let me jump in there, Kristen, if it's all right. You mentioned something that really caught me off. Well, I'm aware of it, but every time people say it, it just sends shivers down my spine. But you mentioned industrial hemp being imported from other countries.
Yeah.
And I know part of the problem with that is, especially in hemp coming from China, is a lot of times that stuff is grown in fields with a lot of heavy metals and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, can you explain a little bit about the risks to that? Because I mean, if that's coming into Utah, we should know, and that's the kind of stuff that we should be limiting, right? Or am I just being?
Yeah, that's a huge concern. A lot of people are just talking a lot about the synthetics right now, but they're not really getting into the dynamics of what kind of fertilizers are being grown this specific product. A lot of times too, people think that maybe sometimes manure and composts are the best things to grow cannabis, though they may be good to grow certain other plants and vegetables. There's no other plant in this world, in my opinion, besides psilocybin mushrooms and other things like that have a benefit that cannabis and hemp. Cannabis and hemp, there's no difference between cannabis and hemp. It's the same plant. Hemp technically is industrialized, grows about 16 feet tall, emits male pollen, et cetera, et cetera. The CBD and cannabinoid profile, the phytocannabinoid profile is the same exact profile as cannabis sativa. But the problem is that the number one growing imports coming in from Colombia and China are the largest commercial growers out there as far as growing hemp right now. A lot of people may say, oh no, United States is really growing hemp and doing this, but for a long time, these countries have been growing this specific plant. And what happens is the accumulation. That's the problem with heavy metals. That's the problem with fertilizers. What I've seen mostly in the last 15 years of hemp that I've been dealing with, even getting into the gold rush is what they would say, is that hardly any hemp farmers out there, hardly any hemp farmers in Oregon, Colorado, Washington, especially in Oregon where I was at, no one's flushing their plants. They're using fertilizers, they're using organic teas, but they're not flushing the plant. They're not depleting the medium of salts and heavy metals and whatever it's gathering from the earth from that specific demographic area. So the accumulation and the patience and the accumulation of the individuals taking those specific products is something that is really concerning. And so we don't know what those people are using out there. We don't know Colombia, what they're using. We don't know what China is using. All we know is that they're making it in abundance. They're importing it. People are taking it in mass quantities because right now they just can't facilitate enough hemp CBD to get it to all the processors so that we can accommodate America. So we have to bring it from outside sources.
That's scary.
Yeah, it is really scary. Yeah.
But again, and we've talked about it on here a lot. I've said this a few times, but the thing you mentioned is regulation. We don't know how it's being grown. There's no regulation. And the quote I like is, there's more regulations to make just plain old crackers
Yes.
than
Yeah.
than this. You know, there's regulations for a tube of Vaseline, you know,
Right.
that has to meet certain human suitable for human combustion, human consumption.
Right.
You know, whereas this stuff isn't. There's no inspection. You don't know
Yeah.
how it's grown, where it's grown, and it's sent here
Right.
in a medicinal form. Like
Well,
literally, WTF?
even here at the farm I process at, it only gets inspected once a year, maybe if we're lucky.
Mm.
And they go through a very thorough inspection. I'm grateful for it, but how many other people are not being good stewards when they're processing the material? How do we know how clean they are? Where are they getting their biomass? A lot of the products milled, it's distillates put through a short path distillate process. It's got a lot of isolate going on, and it's kind of all over the place. There isn't really a lot of identification when it comes to processing here. A lot of people are doing a really good job, but at the same time, we just don't know what's going into these products, how they're being processed.
Yeah. There's a need for standards, because even with us allowing CBD to come in from other states, even not even
Right.
worrying about other countries, another state may not have the same growing standards that we are implementing. And
Right.
so, and that goes back to the federal government not really taking the lead that they should have taken back in 2018 when hemp was turned over to the FDA and to the DEA to make sure that
One
Go
more
ahead.
thing I mention is that it is very, very easy to manipulate the chromatography equipment. When you get a batch testing, people get one initial batch testing and they use that one batch for the whole year. So a lot of times people don't want to spend the money to have the laboratories do the work for them. So they're taking one batch test and they're running all year on one batch. How do we
Yep.
know that specific batch is going to be conclusive with the end product that we're getting actually in the stores? How do I know that I'm taking something that is tested from that specific batch, has not been tainted with, and or are they mixing 3 or 4 batches behind that one batch that's being tested chromatography equipment? And this is the concern that I have, because every time that I do a batch, I get it tested. If I run through, say, let's just say 55 gallons of product, when I'm done with that 55 gallons of product, if my expiration date isn't up or my batch isn't expired, I'm going to do another batch testing again, because I know that I need clarification not only for myself, but for the people who are processing with me, the state of mind that I'm going to be in thinking about that, who's going to be consuming my specific product, and then also giving proper delegation and education to those who are consuming my product to assure them that they're getting a quality, safe product at a reasonable price.
Well,
And that's what patients expect.
yeah,
Correct.
we do. We expect it from all of our cannabis products.
They deserve that.
We do. We do. I know that we have struggled in this state with the dispensaries and the vendors getting COAs. And to your point, and I don't know if you meant it that direction, but I know that COAs are easy to fool. Chromatograms are a little tougher because you're looking at the full graph of what's going on with that plant. And that's actually what we've been instructing patients to start advocating for. And what I would really like us to focus on this year is making sure that we get that documentation, because like to Tim's point, it's important, it's critical. And not just to Tim's point, but to Doug's point. He's dealing with a fragile child and he needs to know what's going on with the medicine that he's about to give her. You know, if he is going to go the CBD route. Shelby relies on good labs from her vendors, so she knows how she can guide her patients and also how to teach her nurses. This is what you're looking for. This is what a good chromatogram is. This is what a good COA number looks like. All this stuff is super important. I think the more we educate each other, the better we force the market to improve. You know, we raise that bar. There was somebody that had their hand up, and I think it was a Zach. I'm not sure. Was I wrong? Was it you, Zach? Or
I
both
just
of
made a
Zach?
couple of comments. Oh no, different Zach.
Oh, I've got 3 Zachs on tonight. Oh my gosh.
Sorry guys.
I do. I've got 3 Zachs. I got my Zach's here in Utah, and I think I've got my Wyoming Zach. Is that you, Zach from Wyoming?
That's me, darling. Good to hear from you.
You too. Thanks for joining us. Was there anything in the comment section you wanted to share out loud, or were you just being snarky? I can't see the comments.
You know me well enough. I'm going to call it like it is. I'm really frustrated because my wife ran for Senate last year, and she was very pro marijuana, very pro CBD, very pro, health conscious, and she was doing her best. She really did. But we had a Tolkien Democrat that won by a landslide. And the only comment that I had was that it was unfortunate that he won, and then he had the opportunity to vote against a new CBD bill that would expand CBD in Wyoming. And we barely have CBD, barely. And to have this conversation with you guys and be able to educate myself further is so unbelievably rewarding. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of you experts and everything that you guys can add to the subject and add to the conversation. But the major issue that we're having here in Wyoming, and I think a lot of people are seeing the same thing across the country, is that there's a major disconnect between the local officials and the educated population. And the population is more aware of the subject than any of the politicians. And in this state in particular, it's a taboo subject. And they're unwilling to even have the conversation, let alone back a bill that's necessary to support some of their candidacy or some of their constituency. It's unfortunate that we're looking at a situation where the consumers, the public, are more educated than the people that are running this country, and yet they don't even realize that they're not running this country. We are supposed to be running this country, and it's so unfortunate that we are seeing this situation. I just wanted to voice how much I appreciate you guys and everything that you guys bring to the table. I'll be on these as often as I possibly can, simply just to educate myself further, because that's the key to solving this problem, is educating people on the issues and making sure that patients are recognized for their issues, and that they have a viable option outside of opioids or any of these other drugs that the government has deemed okay. And I'm using air quotes even though I'm not on camera. No, I adore you guys. So thank you so much.
Can I ask you what is a Tolkien Democrat? Because, like, are you talking Lord of the Rings, like Frodo, ring bearers?
I mean to say that this is like an incumbent Democrat that is constantly winning the vote because he's just a Democrat in a Democrat county. We're unfortunately in a situation where we're looking at constantly across the board in Wyoming. If it's a red county, they vote red. If it's a blue county, they vote blue. And there's no way around it. Even though the candidate who's running for office, whether they're blue or red, it doesn't matter. They are uneducated on this subject in particular, and they are not voting in favor of the way the people have supported it. We've received all the all the signatures that we required to get the ballot initiative that we successfully completed on the ballot, but we can't actually submit any of those petitions because Wyoming will be against it no matter what we do. And so I'm constantly trying to fight for this subject, and the constituency has voted. The constituency has shown up. They've signed the petitions, and yet the politicians just don't understand. They don't want to touch this subject. It's too taboo.
It's Wyoming, the Utah of the North.
Yeah. I've spent a couple of years there now with you, Zach, and trying to help raise awareness. And so I'm going to segue that right into that, because CBD was kind of an amazing thing to happen here in Utah. We were the first state in the country to actually pass any CBD legislation. And we always had hoped that that would be something that could happen in those conservative states, like Wyoming. If I could just offer the suggestion, Zach, is to continue raising awareness. The thing is, you have to just stay on them and stay persistent. We were on these guys for 4 straight years. I was tenacious as hell. Doug was there. Drew was there with me the entire time. My God, it's been 10 years, guys. Just kind of pushing and pushing and pushing. And it really is going to take the patient stories. And you've got to look past the party affiliations, because honestly, cancer doesn't care if you're a Democrat or a Libertarian or a Republican. It just doesn't care. So if you can get that red state or that red county, to find somebody in that county who really could use cannabis, that person becomes your hero that you're championing for. It's really making that politics is really in your backyard. It's so close to home. Find your city councilman, you might know some, and talk to them about this. Find those stories, do the persistent education, and come at it with a softer hand even. I'm still happy to connect you with whatever resources I can help you guys with, finding those subject matter experts who can come into the state and help. I still have connections with LEAP, which is, law enforcement. Was it law enforcement? Something PAC. Anyway, they are very helpful in working with your law enforcement and helping educate. It may take just that persistency and building those relationships. Tiffany was up on the hill with us in those last couple of years, and it's hard, but she knows and she saw developing a relationship with a legislator, letting them know how you feel about something was really, really impactful for our state. But I feel you, Zach. I really
You know,
do.
Christine,
Sorry, I got
I
us
love
off
you to
on
death.
that.
I just want to say, Christine, I love you to death. I absolutely adore you. And other than my wife, you are one of the queens in my life for sure. One of the major issues that we find here in Wyoming, I feel, is that as I talk to the consumers, as I talk to the constituency in the territory, I find that they are terrified to be able to speak and support the subject and be able to say how important it is in their lives. And especially for the patients who have no advocacy in the state. And in the comment that I made in the comments, the main thing for me is making sure that people who support this subject should be able to feel safe to speak their minds, to be able to say how they feel. And unfortunately, in this state, they feel that they are being persecuted. And by speaking out in favor of this subject, that they are literally allowing the government into their homes to be able to be further persecuted, to be arrested, to be, it's so sad to hear so many people say that they support this subject, and yet they can't say anything openly because they know that they are going to be judged, that they are going to be persecuted, that they could be prosecuted. It is unfortunate.
It really is. Thanks, Zach. Let's get to the other Zach. We have another Zach asking.
We have two other
with this cute puppy.
Go ahead. Zach King.
Zach
You had your
King.
hand up, friend.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about was how Dr. Grinspoon talked about the ensemble effect, and how I learned in 2018 that CBD wasn't necessarily the backseat driver. It was part of the entire choir, and that there's CBC and CBN, and just understanding that the plant has phenotypes, and there's such a complex thing, like Tim was saying, that I can have all these ideas of things that I think are great for cannabis, or we can see what cannabis can teach us. And the more that I've just seen, like the farmers that actually do organic farming, or that get away from pesticides and get away from these other on all hands on deck type of mentalities, but where you let the plant actually express itself and do its senescence, like that's really what helps my PTSD the most, is actually seeing a living thing help me, because it's like this little plant is actually giving all it's got so that it can help us, and like it's giving it back because we help them. And I think that once we actually understand that the world we're living in isn't all anger and frustration, like there are things, like there's plants, there's community. Being able to trim with the hemp farmers was really cool. I loved that. I just wish we could have more connection to the plant and to the different cannabinoids, and you think about the or is it the flavonoids. We need to learn more about flavonoids and about the terpenoids and monosesquinoids, and there's all these different kinds that we just are so oblivious to, and yet they're charging so much that it's just the only place we can find the relief is in the hemp. And so I'm just grateful for Tim and many others that are out there growing this amazing plant. And I wish I could, but that's my hope before I die, that we'll have that opportunity. But this is a great community and a great opportunity to learn and build our knowledge. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Zach.
Thanks for sharing that, Zach. I think that's something. I think sometimes we forget how lucky we are in a state like this to have so many advocates who have boldly walked next to me as I cried like an idiot that, hey, I'm using cannabis and we need safe access. I forget places like Wyoming and how scary it truly is. We have gotten so comfortable here. And I know, Shelby, you feel the same way in Arizona. We've had it for so many years. You know, we're complaining about prices, and of course, Zach's up there. God, just like, don't arrest us if we want CBD would be fantastic, you know? So,
But I also remember that fear of when we were advocating for it as users. Before the law changed, there was such an anxiety, and even me, you, Christine, all of us were like talking in code. It's, you know, like that meme of Agatha Harkness, you know.
Yeah,
we're using our words because again, we were in a state where literally if they chose to, they could destroy your life. They could come arrest you. They could do a drug SWAT raid, all of that, and we just had their good faith gentleman's handshake that they're not going to do that. And you know, that took a lot of faith. You know, I think it was about a good year until after it was legalized that I started feeling comfortable, you know, doing things like this.
Yeah, it's taken a long time for me, and I look back on it, and Doug, you were so brave with Ashley, and Desiree Hennessy from UPC with Hestevon. There were so many patients. They were so brave with us, standing out there demanding access. And so I do forget how lucky we are and how scary it has been. But it also is a good reminder of how we need to keep fighting, because Zach's state's going to need access, and they're going to hit the same bumps in the roads that we have hit with hemp and everything else.
And also, it's important to look how far we've come and what we have as patients have done. Like, you know, it sometimes I have to remind myself, you know, with PTSD comes the depression, and, you know, get down on myself, but reminding ourselves that we did this, you know, we made that happen. Patience, we got together, you know, and we said to the state of Utah, no, this is something that you are going to change. They said no. We said, well, we'll see about that. And they literally did everything they could to stop it. And nevertheless, we persisted. And here we are now with a fully functional program that still needs a lot of work. But I think as patients and patient advocate and community leaders in this community, we need to remind ourselves and give ourselves, you know, a pat on the back.
Some phrase for sure. I was telling you this earlier before we came on. I don't think patients realize the successes that happened this past legislative session. Like, they have been showing up for meetings and committee hearings all summer, all year, this year, last year, and legislation is moving. So it does work. We're seeing it happen here. Patients are engaging with their legislators. They are writing to the health department. They are pushing back and demanding answers. And that's what you guys should be doing. You don't need me to be your mouthpiece. I'm happy to be just standing in the room with you and shouting next to you.
Well, I think Tim hit it on the head there when he was saying that, you know, we're to a point now where we can have these conversations with our legislators, and we don't have to be out there burning people in effigy. And there was a time when you know, that seemed like a pretty good thing to do. It was like, yeah, you know what, we should probably do that and see what happens. Christine and I were talking about it last week, where I explained to her that for a while there, while we were doing all this advocacy work, I had a go bag set up for my daughter and myself, and my wife and I had codes set up so that if the stormtroopers came kicking in the door, you know, it could, because we didn't know. I mean,
we were always poking the bear. Yeah.
So
we all had.
Yeah, I've got a go bag, and Julie had no idea which direction I was planning on going to get out of town, just so that, you know, plausible deniability, she wouldn't know where we were. I'd pick up a burner phone. I had a couple of $100 in my wallet so that I could at least make the state line before I had to worry about anything. But I think Tim, yeah, all over a stupid plant. And I think Tim has hit on it when he mentioned that we can have these conversations with our legislators now. And They're not going to look at us like a bunch of psycho Che Guevaras that are trying to come in here and take over the Capitol. You know, we had a need, and the need was partially met. We still have a long way to go, but we're on the right track. And
well, they looked at me kind of weird when I got into the room. You know, they gave me a little bit of time to speak, and I wasn't. I was very direct, and the lack of education that they had upon the plant, CBD, hemp, cannabis in general. And so when they seen that I was handling myself in an intellectual way, and I was there with a couple of other hemp farmers, and I was talking in a way that was educating them, but putting things in a projective motion that were going to be positive and finding out solutions and giving them plan A, B, C, and D. They really just stopped and looked at me. And I could tell you one thing, the Attorney General was sitting there writing down more than they were talking. And so I felt that that was a big influence, and it pushed things in a positive way. I think if we stop being rebellious and we can talk to them on a structured professional level, that we're just not some stoner hippie, crazy hemp farmers that want to rebel against the system or overgrow the thought process of the government, but show them that it can be done in a way that's beautiful. And going back to Wyoming, if we can have analytics, what I did was in Oregon, we were in the same boat as we are here, and even more so in Wyoming. The only way we were able to get through the politicians and get through the people in the position of power was to have analytic results, have the analytic results, talk to the doctors, the oncologists. Why is this medicine working in the way that it is? So that the patients wouldn't have to necessarily talk as much, give them the paperwork. They would take that back into their office. They would examine that themselves, come to the determination that this product or this plant is as beautiful as we say it is. They look up their own research and development, and then they ponder that idea. Next time we have the meeting, they see all those analytical results. They have the literature from the doctors. They have the literature from the patients. And then they start making an elected decision after that point. And we found by doing that was actually the most beneficial thing that we could do, because we showed it on paper. We weren't just talking, because talk is cheap.
Indeed. Christine, you're muted.
It's because I was coughing. I really appreciate your input there, Tim. Thank you so much. Shelby, do you want to offer some insight on what you've been experiencing? I just wanted to give you a little bit of time, and because I'd like to know how it looks in a different state that has medical cannabis and adult use.
Yes, we do have recreational at this time and medicinal. I've spoken with a lot of dispensaries, and at this time we're seeing more recreational and adult use instead of the medical side of things. And it's really coming in with this component of education, right? Especially if someone's coming in with a disease process that the dispensary is unaware of, and they're just going and medicating. I'm trying to bridge that gap where they can come in and have a healthcare nurse perspective, right? Because there is monitoring. If they're on other pharmaceutical medications for their disease process, those things should be monitored. I resonate with absolutely it kind of being this like hidden, especially in my position as a nurse. I've been doing this for 8 years, and me coming out with my story, I just had to keep pushing. And my person that I wanted to win over was my dad. And I get how the church is relative to those kind of things, but I've really been able to open up that communication barrier that has held this plant, you know, because my use has been since teenage years, but then I started to see the effects of going into the pharmaceutical route for those comfort and things, right? Because I felt like a shame using this plant for support. So that has been my overall mission. If I could win over my dad, then I could just win over anybody. And at this point, I'm bringing in cannabis education to assist living facilities, because we're noticing that patients that are medicating outside, they are needing transition and support to facilities. And if they're not having that advocacy and that support, right, things can turn detrimental, because if overall this is providing quality of life, and that's really what we need to be advocating for. There is synergistic effects with the profile terpenes with the CBD, CBG, CBN. I mean, all of those are relative to anybody that is diving into this education. So your endocannabinoid system is going to be different than mine, and that's really this like regulatory process. How can we bridge this gap and bring balance, right? We need community support. We need to be using our voice, how it has assisted each of us, because guarantee a politician is going to find that they have a family member in this position and all they want is quality of life. And here they are giving this like dimmed down effect to this cannabis plant, but knowing that they could provide a family member with that. So I've had many discussions, you know, with people that are kind of in this high head and not understanding really how we can support each of us. I mean, CBD should be a daily vitamin for every mammal. You know, that's just how our human anatomy is built. So it's bringing down those components, like being in your voice, like sharing how it has assisted you. How can we process emotions? How can we process trauma? You know, breath work, community support. So we're seeing that even healthcare is bridging that gap and going into more naturalistic methods. And of course, psychedelic mushrooms is going to be the next one for trauma healing and things of that nature. Absolutely. So it's bringing in this community support, and how do we integrate ourselves? The cannabis industry is already onto the psychedelic mushroom component. So if we're able to integrate ourselves in this professional manner, like Tim said, you know, going in with this intellectual knowledge of, you know, our human body is built off of these plant materials and how we can sustain it better and provide quality of life, then we're at least able to impact one person. If one person can be impacted, that goes to several others. And it's just that word of mouth, how we can have the appropriate access, clean products, advocating safety is a huge one. Very right. Go low and slow when beginning.
I love all of that. I love all of that. We have 2/3 of our Zacks in the comment section. We're saying, you know, all cannabis use is medicinal, even recreational use is simply undiagnosed medicinal use. You mentioned the there in your state, the adult use recreational program juxtaposed to the medical program, and how you're seeing more adult use. How is that impacting the products? I know in some states we see dispensaries really lean into, because again, there's more profit. So, you know, the higher THC, you know, the stuff that's going to get you high, but doesn't have the full spectrum benefits that medicinal use. Are you seeing an influx of product availability?
I mean, and overall, we can say, you know, all recreational use is medicinal use and all adult use is medicinal, but there is a gap that education is not being supported. I have been at bedside for a long time, and I have seen where these high THC component products are causing different side effects, especially if someone's already on pharmaceutical, right? You know, increase in anxiety, your heart palpitations. So it's really the patient needs to be coming in and being supported by a healthcare professional. We are seeing acute psychosis because our endogenous system can only count so much. There is opening up that subconscious, you know, those things are relative. So in terminology, we could say recreational use is medicinal use, but people aren't correlating that. And so when I'm going into dispensaries out here, they are not seeing patients with medical cards coming in, right? The most time we'll see those is early in the morning when someone's having, you know, a really hard time even just getting out of bed, and they want to make it to the dispensary to get their medication, and then they're home secluding themselves, especially our geriatric population. So, and then I mean, we have drive-throughs out here. It's nonstop. So profit is huge out here. And I've really bridged the gap on how do we support, even when they are getting medication, to go out and safely be dosing. Because from the medical side, you know, there has been pharmaceutical interventions needed for someone that's consumed too much. So it's bridging that gap and acknowledging where each individual my system can only take so much THC. I'm definitely on a tolerance break at this moment, just to integrate myself. I've had myself personally not good side effects from high THC because it's going in there and just not knowing better, especially when first starting out as a patient. So I've really bridged the gap and just used me as my own testimonial, you know, and hopefully that's coming and supporting other patients who are just beginning and they don't know either.
That's true. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Wow. Well, did I miss any comments there? No.
Just
That is,
affirmations and support.
Totally.
yes. Thank you for that.
1000%.
I've always been worried about the adult use market and the medical market and the confusion between use and abuse. And I still feel like adults should have that as an option, but I think if they knew better ways to treat things, they wouldn't necessarily need, you know, you're managing things a bit better, I guess. I would love to see a much liberal medical program than a full-on adult use program. I think that makes the most sense, but
and we are all, you know, in this sovereign position as adults to be appropriately medicating ourselves and things like that. So it's acknowledging that also, and just the support. If there's that bridge, you know, these other healing mechanisms or a support person to call and just be like, you know, community makes a huge difference, especially with mental health and trauma healing and, you know, anxiety, depression. It goes to a lot of those components also.
Agree.
Zach King says safe access without qualifying conditions. You know, I think that is really important. You know,
we actually did that in Wyoming's ballot initiative. That's what we did. We removed qualifying conditions and put that relationship right where it needed to be with the doctor and the patient. If the doctor says, I feel this would work for you, that's the only support that you need. You don't need government in there saying, well, let me check this list. They don't know.
Amen.
They don't
Amen.
know.
And I'll be totally honest. A lot of our talk with patients is behind closed doors. You know, there's so many different avenues that we've tried on the medical protocols, you know, and what we've been educated with. But we do a lot of that, you know, why don't you go and try this behind closed doors? Because it's still that perceived perception, but there are a lot of healthcare professionals that are behind this.
There are.
And a lot of healthcare professionals that are consuming.
Yes. Yep. We have that here too. But some of them are still pretty quiet. So I'm hoping the more we have these conversations, the more comfortable people will start feeling about it. We've come a long way on this hour this evening. I am grateful for everybody and all the input you guys have brought to the table on this. As we go throughout this month, I'm grateful for plant medicine and everything that it can do to help provide support to patients. I hope that we can continue to advocate for safe access, and standards and regulations is the next step in advocacy. So thank you for joining us this evening. You'll catch us here next week at 7 o'clock. We'll have another guest and another topic, and I hope to see you guys soon. You have a
Thank you guys. Good work. Thank you.